You know, when you think of Easter Island, or Rapa Nui as it's properly called, you probably picture this. These massive, silent stone heads staring out from a remote, kind of treeless landscape. They are one of history's great puzzles. I mean, how did they even get there? And what on earth happened to the people who built them? Well, today, we're going to unravel that very mystery.
So get this. This is what the very first European to arrive, Admiral Roggeveen, had to say back in 1722. He sees this barren island, and he says it's, quote, devoid of heavy, thick timber for making any machines. And yet, everywhere he looks, there are these giant statues. It just didn't make sense. And that contradiction, that right there, created a mystery that's fascinated people for centuries.
So that's the big question, right? The paradox at the very heart of the Easter Island story. How was this even possible? And it's that seeming impossibility that gave birth to a very dramatic and now very famous explanation. All right, let's start with a story that probably sounds familiar to you. It's this powerful cautionary tale about a society that basically destroyed itself. And it got super popular, probably because it feels like this perfect, simple warning for our own time. A fable about environmental collapse, something people call ecocide. The classic story goes something like this. The islanders got obsessed with building bigger and bigger statues. To do it, they chopped down every single tree to roll them into place. This, of course, led to total ecological collapse, and from there, society just spiraled into brutal warfare and even starvation. It's a clean, simple, and frankly terrifying story. But is any of it actually true? Well, in recent years, archaeologists have started to re-examine all the evidence, and a completely different picture has started to emerge, one that honestly challenges every single part of that classic story we all thought we knew. Okay, so the first domino to fall in his whole ecocide theory is its biggest claim, that the islanders wiped out their forests just to move the Moai statues. But what if that wasn't even necessary? What if they didn't need the trees at all? For the longest time, everyone just assumed they rolled these huge statues on logs. Makes sense, right? But new research and some really cool experiments suggest they were engineered to be walked upright. Using ropes, teams would rock the statues from side to side, inching them forward one step at a time. And the craziest part? The Rapa Nui folklore always said the statues walked to their platforms. It turns out they might have been telling the literal truth. And this method? It required almost no wood. So if moving the statues didn't cause the deforestation, then what did? Well, the evidence now points to a much, much smaller culprit. The Polynesian rat. They arrived with the first settlers, and on an island with no predators and a buffet of palm nuts, their population exploded into the millions. They were eating the palm seeds so fast, the forest just couldn't grow back. Okay, so the forest disappeared, largely thanks to the rats. The classic story says this is where the famine and the collapse began. But again, what does the evidence actually show us? You'd think they'd be in trouble, but far from it. The Rapa Nui adapted in the most brilliant ways. They developed these incredible farming techniques, like rock gardens to keep moisture in the soil. They planted crops inside caves and built these cool little stone windbreaks for their plants. And here's the kicker. They actually made their land more productive after the forests were gone. How amazing is that? Now, this number is so important. I want you to just look at it for a second. 2%. Out of all the human remains that have been studied on the island, what percentage do you think shows signs of a violent death? Yep, just 2%. I mean, that 2% figure is incredibly low. This completely flies in the face of the whole brutal Civil War story. You don't find the hilltop forts or weapons caches you see on other Pacific islands where we know there were terrible wars. The archaeology points to a remarkably peaceful society, not one that was tearing itself apart. So if there was no self-inflicted ecocide, no mass starvation, no huge civil war, what actually happened to the Rapa Nui? Well, a collapse did happen, but it happened much later, it was way faster, and it's a far more tragic story than the myth would have you believe. The real collapse started right around the time outsiders showed up. European ships brought diseases the islanders had zero immunity to. Then, in the 1860s, things got even worse. Peruvian slave raiders came and kidnapped nearly half the remaining population, including almost all their leaders and elders, and colonialism delivered the final blow. There's a term for this. It's called the virgin soil effect. When you have an isolated population like the Rapa Nui, diseases that might seem common to us, like smallpox, are an invisible, unstoppable killer.
They were being wiped out by something they couldn't even see. And just look at the result of this. The devastation it's just staggering. You go from a thriving population of around 3,000 people before contact down to just 111 survivors by 1866. This wasn't a slow decline. This was a near total wipeout in just over a century, all caused by disease and slavery.
And the loss wasn't just in numbers. It was a loss of their culture, their very soul. Among those kidnapped in the slave raids was every single person who knew how to read Rongo Rongo, the island's unique written language. To this day, we can't decipher it. In one horrific act, their entire written history was silenced forever. So you see, we have to completely reframe this entire story. The real lesson of Easter Island is not what we thought it was. It's time to put that old fable to rest and really understand what the evidence is telling us.
So, which story does the evidence actually tell? Is this a simple tale of ecological suicide? A convenient story about a short-sighted people who brought about their own doom? Or is it a story of cultural genocide? A true, tragic history of an ingenious and resilient society that was systematically destroyed by disease, slavery, and colonialism? The evidence, it's overwhelmingly pointing to the latter.
So, what's the bottom line here? The people of Rapa Nui weren't foolish. They were brilliant survivors and innovators. Their world didn't end because they were reckless. It ended because our world came to them. Their story isn't a fable about ecocide. It's a real, historical tragedy of genocide.
And that leaves us with one final thought. Instead of a simple warning about failure, maybe the real story of Easter Island is a powerful testament to human creativity and resilience, and at the same time, a tragic reminder of just how fragile any society can be when faced with overwhelming forces from the outside.